Are you relaxed? I'm relaxed. I just got back from a week in Colorado, camping, sitting by a creek, sitting by a river. And an interesting divine appointment happened when I'm there. Wait 1 second on the song, guys. An interesting thing happened when I was there. I met one of our online congregants. Yeah, who actually wasn't even from Colorado. She was from Georgia. But she found out from Facebook, where I would be, connected with me and said, would you like to get together? So I said, well, sure, let's get together. So we got together in Colorado, and we had a lovely time just checking in, meeting each other, putting faces to names and ideas out there in cyberspace. And one thing that I was keenly aware of in my time spent with her was the practice of a Unity student, because she was tuned in on all levels to everything that was going on around her. She was acknowledging that it was a divine appointment, that she was on this spiritual journey of taking a leap of faith in this new phase of her life, of what she's going to do, where she's going to live, and that it happened to be that her minister happened to be in Colorado, a place she's looking at moving, to kind of welcome her. And I happen to have some history in Colorado. I went to school there. So I could orient her to the area and what places to look at and such. So this whole time together was very crisp, very clear, crystal clear for divine appointment. And the consciousness of the Unity practice of metaphysics was ripe and present. And what I mean by that is that both of us were paying attention at all times to everything going on. So whether it was the song that was playing when we came in to the place that we met, or it was the person that she met in the bathroom that happened to be from Georgia as well and moved out there when she was at the same age and really welcomed her. She came out of the bathroom like laughing with this woman, bonding, going, yeah, okay, and we're exchanging numbers, right? Divine appointment, right? So one of the Unity practices, I tell that story because one of the Unity practices is to see beyond what reason and what the senses tell us. If you have heard when you're in Unity the term metaphysics, you may be confused by it. It may be something that's new to you. And sometimes when we're in Unity for a long time, we throw it around without explaining what metaphysics is. And we go into interpretations, ideas, concepts of things that we got, and fail to kind of explain how we got there or what this other practice is that we're using. So today is a little bit about metaphysics. Today is about looking beyond the senses and using a metaphysical lens to look at our world and our reality. Metaphysics is known as being a branch of philosophy. It says that deals with the first principles of things, including abstract concepts such as being, knowing, substance, cause, identity, time, and space. You can also think of metaphysics as a study of what is outside objective experience, that which goes beyond reality, outside of the sense perception. Metaphysics studies what cannot be reached through objective studies in material reality. A metaphysician attempts to clarify the fundamental notions by which people understand the world. Has anyone ever had a dream? Well, if you have a dream and a person comes to you in a dream, or an animal or anything like that, and you choose to go on an adventure of looking at the qualities and characteristics in that dream as they may be aspects of your consciousness, rather than it's just, okay, well, in my dream, I saw my grandmother and, she flew through the sky, danced, twirled around 5 times, and then her pink tutu turned purple, and then she fluttered off with a bear in the woods. Right? So rather than going, okay, well, that was really interesting. That's what happened with my grandmother, tutu, pink pearl. I must have seen something on TV the night before. You kind of look at this and you go, what could this be in aspects of my consciousness? What does my grandmother represent to me? What does freedom represent to me? What does a tutu represent to me? Is that a dream that I let go of being a dancer when I was young? What is it? And you go to this other level behind the surface, underneath the surface. We do that a lot of times with songs, and we're going to go on an adventure this morning. And this adventure is meant to stretch us. Are you ready to be stretched? Our band this morning, I overheard them talking, and they said, if you want to expand, how can you expand if you don't stretch? We were talking about how much we loved the music this morning. So I invite you to enter into the idea when you hear songs that maybe you can dive into another location in your mind where, often songs are about relationships and people, but what if it's about the self? And what if it's about the evolution of God consciousness? And what if it's about our spiritual journey and how we can utilize our emotional nature and our thinking nature on our spiritual journey? So this song that I'm going to invite Gabby to do, welcome Gabby. This song that Gabby is going to share with you is often known as a love song, as a heartbreaking song, but I would invite you to pay attention to the concept, the idea that our emotions might drive us crazy. That when we say baby, when we're talking about the other person, that may be, in fact, the emotional nature and our getting tired of being run around by the emotional nature and how that nature can be with us as individuals and how we can master emotions. Let's see how we go. So does that seem like a stretch? Or could you feel it? Could you see it? My emotions are taking me on these rides. When the lights go down, when I'm in my space, when I'm by myself, I can get caught up in them. I'm getting tired of being mastered by my emotions, and I'm ready to learn the art of mastering consciousness, thought, and emotion. If it seems like a far stretch, and the idea of taking a song that possibly has one meaning, and you can Google songs and people will blog all the different interpretations that they have, right? If you're ever a songwriter or you do any writing, you know that people interpret what they think you meant by whatever you were writing, and you could have had an entirely different idea. But in Unity, one of the things we do is we grant permission to the individual, and in fact, it's beyond that because we know that permission is granted by the source of your being, right, for each one of us, to interpret and to get what something is for us. And not only do we support that, we actually encourage that. Because if we are filled by someone else's thoughts, and we are filled by someone else's idea of what God is, what they are, then we are taking our best ideas, which may be benevolent and may be beautiful, and we are placing them upon someone else. And that doesn't necessarily stretch us or grow us, does it? What stretches us and grows us is looking directly into each other's eyes as spiritual beings and saying, the source that sourced me sourced you. The creator that created me created you. The intelligence that comes through me can come through you. And when we do that, we know that even though there may be a meaning that something was first launched with, that meaning is constantly making itself. That in fact we live in a living, breathing universe of intelligence where things can come to us by divine appointment at any moment, perfectly designed for our awakening and our enlightenment. Amen? So when that happens, the world shifts. Consciousness shifts. And we shift. And in that shift, we begin to lean into different interpretations of things. And you might imagine if the concept of taking a song and getting something else for yourself out of it, something else than was originally meant, may seem odd. You can imagine when Charles and Myrtle Fillmore first began their teaching, how interesting, unique, and odd it may have seemed that they taught a metaphysical interpretation of the scriptures. See, in Unity, we don't teach just the literal translations. We look at the stories in the Bible and the characters in the Bible somewhat like you would look at dream interpretation. We say, okay, this was written, and we look at the history, we look at the foundation, we look at it logically, historically, culturally, even scientifically. It's all welcome in the space of Bible metaphysics. But we look at the scriptures and we acknowledge the sacredness of them, and then we also acknowledge the human condition out of which they were born. And through acknowledging both of those things, we see that it's metaphorical, that it's metaphysical, and that it's mystical. And if we want to take it on, to dive into a journey of looking past the lens and And see, even this talk about the scripture, right, is an analogy for our own lives and how to look at our own lives and our own experience. That it's not just a book, it's not been written, but there's so much more to it, just like you, just like me. So this metaphysical interpretation of the Bible is something that was pretty radical at the time and actually brought unity to its heyday. There are people throughout the world that use Charles Fillmore's Metaphysical Bible Dictionary and don't even know about unity, because it is the most magnificent interpretation, intuitive expression of locations and what those locations in consciousness means, what it means when you say you're walking into Jerusalem, that maybe, just maybe, that story didn't last for 2,000 years so that a person in Lee Summit could go, well, I've never been to Jerusalem, and I'm not planning on going, so that story is really pretty irrelevant to me. But if instead places represent centers in consciousness, like my center of peace, and if I want to walk into the center of peace, how might I follow the path, the trail, the blueprint for unfolding that consciousness? Then all of a sudden, we unfold the flower. All of a sudden, there's a blooming that happens. So this is metaphysics. I want to share with you a little bit about the story of Adam and Eve. Anyone heard of it? I was thinking I probably didn't have to review the story. So the nutshell is there was this guy, Adam, and then he needed a companion. So there is this lady, Eve, and she was made out of his rib. Is that good? So that's the nutshell. Now, from that nutshell, human beings have created a lot of funny stuff that we're still acting out. Some of that funny stuff is the idea that there is somehow something wrong, right? Because Eve later becomes the temptress and misleads Adam, and all not heaven breaks loose. Heaven consciousness is lost, and we're pretty much all in trouble, and it's all due to the woman. We know that's not the whole story, right? Do we? Maybe, no. We know that's not the depth of the story, right? But when you look at it metaphysically, Charles Fillmore said that Adam represents the original consciousness, the thought consciousness, the thought seed. And Eve, on the other hand, represents the emotion. Now think about this. If you think about what probably comes first, does thought come first or emotion? From a thought is born an emotion. And so if we're teaching not about the woes of women and not about how bad it is that there is woman that is a temptress that misleads man and causes the fall of all creation, if we're looking a little bit more deeply than that, we can see the possibility that this is a story that teaches us how to master our emotional and our thinking field and what it's really about. Now, the interesting part of the human condition is that we tend to experiment with the limited sides of life and of things. And so we do have this concept, don't we, of our emotional nature, of what we could call in this story the feminine, the Eve nature. We have this story that nature can weaken us, it can drive us, and it can distract us from our purpose and our center. Yeah? It can weaken, it can drive, and it can distract. Well, what does this cause? This causes a sense of duality. Are you getting the fall? This causes a sense of duality, a sense of separation, a sense of awareness that I'm not safe. They woke up to see that they were not clothed. Oh, well, they woke up to see that, they were not clothed, and then they had to make clothes, right? But they woke up to these aspects of consciousness that were about battle and opposition, that were about falling, were about deception. And these concepts are misleading. They mislead us culturally, but they come from this probably idea that somehow is ingrained on the path of spiritual evolution. that we need to understand the aspects of our thinking and our feeling nature and put them in right perspective. Just like we all need to understand the grace and the aspects of the masculine and the feminine nature within our own being, which is also demonstrated in outer relationships of partners, of friends, a masculine energy and a feminine energy. We're far enough along the social spectrum to know that we all embody both, that we all have within us both. But this dynamic, this consciousness of thinking in duality, of thinking that one is good and one is bad, is misleading. And it causes a somewhat dangerous dynamic. And if you look at the story of Adam and Eve, you can tell that if Adam and Eve, thinking and feeling, the emoting nature and the thinking nature, were opposed to each other and did not work it out, did not work in harmony, did not create a demonstration of togetherness, if that did not happen, the story would stop there, wouldn't it? Supposedly, the whole scripture would stop there. Because in fact, what this story is about, it's about the creative process. And when the thinking and the feeling nature work together in harmony, when they work together in divine intelligence, you actually have the most magnificent thing, not something bad at all, not a fall at all. You have the act of creation, metaphysical, mystical, and spiritual. Now, is then this feeling nature bad, or is it critical? Is it essential to the development of human consciousness, to the development of creation? I believe it's essential. I believe this emotional nature is not bad, but it is intelligence. It is information. Now we get that idea of the temptress, sure. Because just like in that song, if we take things to be real, if we take every feeling to be real, even every thought, if we take them to be real, they can be a temptress. They can drive us to places that we never intended to go. They can mislead us. They can create realities that we weren't looking for. Because it is a great power, right? Emotions have a great power. But when we expand ourselves on the spiritual journey, we learn to become aware of that power, to find our right relationship with that power, and we learn how to presence our emotions. I use the word presence our emotions because to presence an emotion means to fully allow it to be there without pushing it away, without pulling it closer, without getting lost in it, without letting it overcome you, but allowing its power and its creative faculty to be useful and to be dedicated to the highest principle of creation. And without that element of our nature, we're just thinkers. We're not creators. Because that is the fuel, that is the power, that is the driving force that bursts forth from the forms of ideas in mind to the actuality of experiences in matter. But we tend to, a lot of times with these emotions, we tend to believe them and make them real. When we do so, we use that creative faculty in odd ways. Because we go on creating. Have you ever had an experience? Maybe you had an emotional bawling session where you were just crying your eyes out. Maybe it was something else, who knows? But you had something that maybe in the past really triggered you. And then you had either a moment of awakening or you had enough time pass when you recognized that that emotion was out of proportion with reality, with spiritual reality. That either that emotion just left you in an instant, or you recognize through a little bit more life, wow, to become so caught up in that emotion when really everything was okay, right? I took a psychology class in college, and I remember the teacher gave us a practice, and she said, when you feel like crying, just do it, just go for it. Cry all you want, but set the timer. Just cry all you want, set the timer for a minute or so, and just go for it. And then at the end, just see how you feel. And it was a great practice to know and to subtly see how we can engage the emotions and fuel them, fan them, and then we can also turn them off and just watch and watch them. It is for each of us to learn this nature within ourselves so that on this spiritual path, we don't feel like we're falling, but we feel like we have the mastery to activate our dreams and activate our visions, certainly and especially our crystal clear visions. But how do we get to a crystal clear vision when we live in this world of emotion and this world of thought? Well, if we really look at this relationship between the thinking nature and the feeling nature, we can see that the truth of this relationship is that it is a beautiful, beneficial relationship. That is, in fact, an essential relationship. That this is the relationship that creates balance in the universe and balance in our own beings. That the purpose of emotions are to be informative, not directive. The Christ consciousness, the enlightened state of consciousness in every being, in every aspect of life, that global cosmic Christ consciousness, that is the directive power. That is the directive power. And all other powers lift unto that power. So then what do emotions become? They become clarifying agents, agents of intelligence. But emotions are not there to sway us. They are here to inform us. So are we ready to let go of the battle? Are we ready to release the idea and the concept of conflict between our thinking nature and our feeling nature? When we do, a great harmonizing happens. And that's the harmonizing of this thought and emotion, neither terribly valuable nor terribly dismissible, both useful. Both could be temptresses. Have you ever had the practice where you say, I am not my thoughts. I am not my emotions. If you haven't tried that on, it's a pretty amazing practice. To be in the midst of thoughts, the midst of the monkey mind, and to go, I am not this thought. To be captured by an emotion and feel it fully and still say, I am not my emotions. And to find that when we get to that place, a great harmonizing happens. When we bring the thinking nature and the feeling nature together in harmony with sacred stewardship, stewardship led by the cosmic consciousness, there is a center that emerges. It's a center that's beyond emotion, though we may call it feeling. It may be something that we think we feel. We may identify it as being an emotion, but it is beyond the carnal mind and the carnal body's ability to emote. You might recognize this if you think back in your life to a time when you have had a center in the core of your being that underlied your emotions, that carried you through something that you shouldn't have been able to get through, something that you shouldn't have been able to do, something that you alone did not have the strength or the faith or the knowledge or the insight to make it through. But something nonetheless carried you through it. For some reason, when you should have been falling apart, you were more secure than you ever felt in your life. For some reason, when you should have been crying and your whole world should have crumbled before you, you got through that period of time with a grace and an ease that did not match the circumstance. Feel that time. Feel that power. It made something easier than it should have been. Maybe it made you clearer about something that the limited information around you said, oh, don't make this decision now. Don't leave that job now. Don't move out there now. Don't do this. Don't do that. There's not enough information. There's not enough thinking to know that this is a good idea. But something inside of you carried you and said, you are whole. This is it. Move forward with your crystal clear vision. You become stronger than you expect, more confident, but not in the human way, in a spiritual way. The secure confidence that comes from knowing that you know, that you know, that you know. So we all have within our consciousness, within our beings, this experience. And it's not magic. It is something that comes from applying a spiritual principle and from activating a spiritual practice, from recognizing that we are here to be vibrantly alive and that we live in a vibrant, active, universal flow, a universal energy, a life force that supports us, that loves us, that wants us to win, that wants our peace, our happiness, that in fact wants us to be emanations of the light of God, that is the pure source. Amen? So, what do we do when we've had this experience? What do we do right now if we've never had that experience? Start observing. Start observing the emotional and the thinking field. Recognize that we are not fully just that. You know, that we, even though we may be overcome at times by the thinking nature and the feeling nature, recognize and call them into harmony. Declare that they are harmonious and working together, that in fact this is the creative process and I am in the midst of it. The second thing to do is, when you have found that space and when you know what it feels like to get the emotions beyond the emotions, the confidence behind the confidence, that which carries you through, which you don't actually have enough intelligence or reason or strength. You know, have you ever had anyone call you courageous? It's a funny thing if someone calls you courageous, right? Because I don't know, is there anyone that really thinks they're courageous? Some people are going, yeah. Those principles, those powers of courage, love, understanding, intuitive insight, all of those faculties, all of those ideas in God mind that are available and accessible to us are right here always, right here in their pure form for us to utilize. So when we begin to feel that experience, the rule of thumb is to ground it. Ground ourselves in that experience. Let it grow roots, root it in, and then remember it. That's a big key. And a lot of times we forget that key. Remember it, because remembering it gives us strength and faith for the future. And remembering it grounds us and roots us so that when the thoughts begin to fly again, the feelings begin to shine again, or we feel overcome, we can look back at that time when we remember it and we can say, to the best of my ability, in that moment in my life, with the highest consciousness available to me, I lived the best life. I made the best decision. I thought the best thought. And I felt the best feeling that was available to me at that moment. And what else can we offer ourselves? What else could you possibly offer yourself but to be grounded and rooted and to know that in a moment of time, you did the best with the consciousness available to you at the time. And when we are rooted there, all God unfolds from that moment forward, because we stand in our conviction. We stand in that truth, and we stand in that knowing, and the universe rushes in to support us. Namaste.